Here we go. Thank you. Hey everybody, welcome to the Dennis from Scratch Q&A show. You got the questions and I got the answers. Our first question today comes from Lala Binh. I think she's been thinking of some questions, if you know what I mean. That was bad. Okay. She says, about raw nut milk. Does roasting nuts cause nutritional loss? What kind of nuts are among the healthiest to make nut milk every day? I've heard some nuts don't have good ratio of omega-3 to 6. Please make a video about nut milk to educate us. Thank you. Well, you're welcome. So she's got several questions there. First off, Layla, probably. Does roasting nuts cause nutritional loss? Yes, it does. And why is that? Well, the fatty acids inside of the nuts are really fragile. So when they hit anything above like 150 degrees, then they start to deteriorate and they become rancid. So that means that they get oxidized and they're bad for you. So yes, if you roast your nuts, you're going to build up toxins inside the nuts, and also you're gonna lose some of the vitamin content. So I say always buy raw nuts and process them from there. Don't buy roasted nuts for sure. After that, you say, what are the best nuts to make nut milk every day? Well, I don't make nut milk a whole lot, but as far as taste is concerned, almonds are really popular. Macadamia nuts, pine nuts are also pretty good. And cashews, although that's gonna have a really specific taste. So it's really just up to taste. Macadamia nuts and almonds are probably gonna be your best options if you just want kind of a milky taste. The pine nuts, cashews, they're gonna have a particular taste. So do what you want though. Pretty much any nut will work. As far as the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is concerned, our modern diet, like a standard American diet, also known as a SAD diet, you're usually looking at like, I don't know, it's like 1 to 20, 1 to 40 omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, so it's super out of balance. A good ratio is like 1 to 1, maybe 1 to 4 on the top end. If you're eating a traditional diet where you're eating a lot of saturated fats like butter, coconut oil, lard, you don't really need to be concerned about the omega-3 and 6s because it's pretty much gonna be in balance. But if you are really concerned about it, I'd say macadamia nuts are pretty much your only option. Macadamia nuts have about a 1 to 7 omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. The next nut on the list has, it's walnuts, and they have a 1 to 17 ratio. But like I said, it shouldn't be a concern if you're eating traditional fats like butter and stuff. As far as making the nut milk is concerned, first off, you wanna buy raw nuts. Second off, you soak the raw nuts. And you do that in water. You just put the nuts into a jar or whatever, fill it up with water just an inch or so above the nut line, add a pinch of salt, and you let that go for 12 to 24 hours. If it's less than 12 hours, then you're not gonna get all of the enzyme inhibitors out of the nuts. So that's why you want to soak it for 12 to 24 hours. Third, you drain the raw nuts after they soak. So you get that water that they soaked in out of there. Fourth, you add some new water and you grind that up to make the milk. This is also where you're gonna add any additional ingredients like a little bit of honey if you want the milk a little bit sweeter, or some vanilla if you want it vanilla flavored, cinnamon, whatever you wanna add to your milk, you do that now. You blend it all up, make it into as fine as you can, and then you strain the mixture through a cheesecloth or through a fine mesh strainer, just something to get those little nut particles out. Or if you don't mind the nut particles, leave them in there. It'll just add to the nutritional content because you'll be getting some nuts in there as well as the nut milk. Now, I mentioned that I don't drink a whole lot of nut milk, and why is that? Well, because I don't have any problem tolerating raw cow's milk, which is what I drink all the time. I love it, I'm used to the flavor, but also raw cow's milk, raw goat's milk, raw camel milk, whatever it be, it is more nutritious than nut milks, even the best raw nut milks made from organic, fresh nuts. Why is that? Well, because nuts don't lactate. It's not actual milk, right? It's a different thing. So there are some nutritional benefits to it, but it's not as nutritious as real milk from an animal. That being said, sometimes people aren't able to get good quality raw milk, and so then they go for the nut milk, which is fine, that's a fair concern. Or some people are unable to tolerate raw milk. If that's the case, then yes, raw nut milk is probably a good option for you. Question 2 comes from BCG19, and this is in reference to my best prenatal vitamin for pregnancy video. They say, what about Naturelo Prenatal? I didn't actually know anything about it, so I looked it up. It's not the worst, but I am skeptical for several reasons. First off, their brand name is Naturelo, which implies natural, right? But that's the only place that they say natural. And this is a common tactic for businesses, is they want to appear natural, but they can't claim that it's natural because it's not, so they just put it in their name. Because brand names can be whatever they want. There's no regulation on that, but there's strict regulation on how they can advertise their product. So if their brand name is Naturelo, but they don't actually advertise that their product is natural, then I kinda, that's a red flag. I smell something fishy, which actually brings us to another point. You may want to consider a different one just for the fact that all of the recent reviewers, they give it like 1 star and they say that they changed the formula for the prenatal and now it smells super fishy, like literally fishy, not just, something's up, but like fishy, right? So if you don't like fishy smelling stuff, especially when you're pregnant, you can smell really, really well, right? Heightened sense of smell when you're pregnant, then probably don't go with that one. But let's get back to it because that's just a side note. Is it natural? Well, they do advertise that there's no soy in it. Well, soy is natural, soy sauce is fine. I don't like how much soy is in other products, like soy lecithin is not good, stuff like that. But there are places for soy. Soy has been traditionally used for a long time. It's a buzz thing to say that soy is bad. They say that it's gluten-free. Well, gluten is also natural. It's not necessarily bad. It's vegan and vegetarian. Those are buzzwords. Vegan, vegetarian, that doesn't necessarily mean healthy. In fact, vegan and vegetarian are not the healthiest way to live for most people. No dairy. I love dairy. I was just talking about that. Raw milk is really good for you. So they're just kind of jumping on the fad idea. But the real way that we can tell if something is good is by reading the information that's on the bottle. That's usually the best place to start. So first off, it says that it has vitamin A, and you see that it says as natural beta carotene from Blockastria trispora. Okay, so Blockastria, however you pronounce it, that's a mold that naturally produces beta carotene. So let's just digest this real quick, no pun intended. So the form of vitamin A that's being supplied in this prenatal is beta carotene. I talk about why that's not a good thing in my other prenatal vitamin video that this is referencing, but it says that it's in that form, okay, and it comes from this mold. So they're not putting the mold in the prenatal, right? They're extracting the beta carotene from the mold and then putting the beta carotene in the prenatal. They don't tell us how they're extracting or what processes they put the beta carotene through after they extract it. And that's a big deal because ultimately everything in the world, every drug, anything comes from naturally occurring materials, right? You wouldn't want to drink gasoline, but technically it comes from a natural thing, right? So if you're just saying that it's coming from a natural thing, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily healthy. And we continue down here, it says vitamin C. Some of it is the acerola cherry extract, which is probably a good form of vitamin C. That's a whole food, right? But they also say that it's also coming from this L-ascorbate, which is a lab-created form of vitamin C. So artificial and natural. If we look at the vitamin D, it says from plant-based something, from wild harvested lichen. So it comes from the wild harvested lichen, okay? And then they process it into what they call this plant-based because again, they're taking something natural and processing it, so it's really no longer in its natural form, like vitamin E. It's as D-alpha tocopherol from sunflower. I'd be happy to, eat sunflower seeds, but I don't want to isolate one nutrient from the sunflower seed and then eat that by itself, because that's not a food, that's a drug. You're not getting whole foods when you take this prenatal. You're getting things that were, once upon a time, whole foods and no longer are. I would be hesitant to take this prenatal because if they're using all this fancy lawyer words saying that it comes from this thing. It comes as this thing. It seems like they're trying to hide stuff. It's kind of like when McDonald's rebranded their buildings from that ugly yellow and red plasticky stuff that they used to have in the 90s, and then they changed it in the early or mid 2000s to, you know, more natural materials, rock and stuff, and then they spruced up the inside. It's the same food. It's still terrible for you, but it looks in a nicer facility to be more natural because, you know, you don't have plastic anymore. You've got rock, which is natural, right? Yeah, well, the food hasn't changed. They're just trying to manipulate your feelings towards the product. Question 3 comes from Sykophantic, because they spelled it Sykophantic. See, psycho has a PH, or a P. It's like psycho. Change your username. Hey Dennis, have you ever heard of Aajonus Vonderplanitz? Would be great to see a video from you discussing about his diet. He also advocates about raw milk too. So I'm not super familiar with him, but I did do a little bit of research. His diet is called the Primal diet. It's a little bit confusing if you just search Primal diet on the internet, on the Googles. It comes up with multiple things. So you probably want to search for his name, which is a really difficult name. I wonder what planet he's from with that kind of a name. Okay, anyway, overall, I think his diet's actually pretty good. He talks about drinking raw milk, which is good. Talks about eating more raw foods in general. He actually, one of the key points of the Primal diet, as I understand it, is you don't cook any food. He thinks that cooking food is bad and is always a no-no. And maybe that is correct in certain cases, specifically if you're trying to heal a disorder. If you're trying to, you know, heal arthritis or cancer or something, then yes, actually a raw diet in many cases has been shown to be very effective. But there's a couple things that I hesitate to say we shouldn't have, and they're cooked foods. So bone broth. Bone broth is really nutritious, and you have to cook the bone broth. That's how you make it. I'm not willing to say that all of the thousands of years that we've had bone broth, our ancestors have been wrong and they shouldn't have been drinking bone broth. They shouldn't have been cooking bone broth. But also bread. If you think about the Western tradition, going back thousands and thousands of years, we've been eating bread as a major part of our diet. There's different ways that bread was made historically, and it's kind of been very bastardized nowadays, so it's really different than how it used to be made. But traditional ways of making bread, it's very healthy for you, but it necessitates that you cook the bread, right? Bread is always cooked. So I don't think that cooking food always is bad for you, but I will say don't cook all your food. You definitely want to have some raw food. Raw milk is really good to drink. Raw eggs are really good to eat. I usually put them in my smoothies and stuff because I think it's, you know, more palatable to eat them that way. I'm not used to eating them raw in other things. Raw meats, probably most people could benefit from eating more raw meats like sushi or steak tartare, right? Or just even a rare steak, because the inside is essentially still raw, right? It just might be warmed up a little bit, but it's essentially raw. Raw fruit is really good, and all of these things have a lot of enzymes, and when you cook the food, all the enzymes are destroyed, all of the probiotics are destroyed. For sure, you should eat more raw things than you probably are right now. I could even benefit from eating some more raw stuff. All raw food, probably not necessary unless you're trying to heal some kind of disorder, in which case a raw diet may very well help you. Question 4 comes from Jace Janitor. He says, or she? Is Jace a boy or a girl name? This is too complicated. It's too complicated. He says, straight to the point video. Pretty rare these days. You, sir, have got yourself a new subscriber. Thanks for the video, smiley face. Well, it's a tough question, but I would say yes. I would say yes, you are correct. I do have clean editing, really just to the point videos, a huge value add for anyone to subscribe. You have done a very wise thing, Jace Janitor. You should all take advice from Jace and subscribe. So thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and that's about it.